There's something quietly terrifying about not being able to stop thinking about someone. You wake up and there they are, in your first thought, like a shadow curled around your mind. You go about your day and somehow they linger. Every song becomes a message. Every silence feels like their voice is just about to speak. It doesn't matter how long it's been or how far away they are or even how irrational your preoccupation seems. You just can't shake them. But here's the thing most people don't realize. When your mind is haunted by someone, it's not just about that person. It's about you. The obsession is real, but so is the message underneath it. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're not weak for being consumed by thoughts of someone who touched your life and left a mark. But if you don't slow down and look at what your own mind is trying to reveal, you'll mistake chaos for destiny. You'll confuse longing with purpose, and you'll sabotage your own growth in the name of someone who might not even know the war going on inside you. Let's make one thing absolutely clear. Your thoughts are not random, especially the ones that repeat themselves. The mind is strategic, almost brutally so. It holds on to things it believes are essential to your survival. That person you can't stop thinking about, your brain registered them as significant, so much so that it looped their presence into your emotional operating system. Maybe they gave you something you weren't getting anywhere else. Attention, validation, intensity, connection. Maybe they wounded you in such a way that your psyche is now fixated on the moment of impact. Either way, your mind is treating them like a puzzle you haven't solved, and it won't let go until you do. But here's the hard truth. The person is just a symbol. The thoughts you keep looping around them are actually fragments of a deeper need. Your need for meaning, for understanding, for completion. You've projected onto them an idea, a phantom memory. And the more you chase it, the further you drift from what's real. The modern world tells you to follow your heart and chase what feels intense. But what if your heart is confused? What if the intensity is just unresolved pain disguised as romantic importance? No one teaches you how to pause and examine your own thoughts with discipline. No one shows you how to question the emotional stories you've built around another person. And because of that, you remain trapped, not in love, but in fixation, a loop, a cycle. The more you think about them, the more power you give to the narrative. And the narrative, not the person, becomes your prison. So what does it mean when you can't stop thinking about someone? It means something inside you has been triggered. And that part of you is asking to be understood, not silenced. Your task isn't to chase them or erase them. Your task is to get curious, ruthlessly curious. What does this person represent to you? What did you feel with them that you haven't been able to feel alone? And why is that feeling so rare in your life that you had to attach it to one person? Because if you don't answer those questions, your fixation will shape your decisions. And it will distort your self-worth. You'll start measuring your value by whether they reach out, whether they look back, whether they miss you. And that's a trap. Because as soon as you do that, you give away your power. You hand over your emotional center to someone else. You become a satellite orbiting someone else's gravity. And every day you don't pull back, you drift further from your own path. This isn't about blaming yourself. See, it's about awakening. It's about reclaiming authority over your mind. When you can't stop thinking about someone, it's a sign that part of your identity has merged with theirs. And the way to heal isn't by chasing them or running from them, but by separating your story from their presence. Your life has meaning, that is not dependent on whether someone stays, notices, or returns. But if you don't build that meaning for yourself, you will keep trying to borrow it from others. You need to become the person who can carry your own weight, not because you're not allowed to feel, but because feelings without direction create chaos. Your obsession isn't proof of love, it's a mirror, one that shows you where your boundaries are thin, where your wounds are open, and where your power has been handed over. And once you see that, really see it, you have a choice. You can keep spiraling deeper into their imagined significance, or you can start anchoring yourself in truth. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about leading them. It's about not letting your inner world be dictated by emotional residue from someone else's presence. Because your mind is precious, your energy is sacred. And if you let your thoughts be hijacked by someone who is no longer in your life, or worse, someone who never truly saw you, then you're giving away the one thing you absolutely cannot afford to lose, your attention. And wherever your attention goes, your life follows. You are not here to be consumed by memories. You are here to build a future. But you cannot build forward if your soul is stuck in rewind. So the question isn't, why can't I stop thinking about them? The real question is, what part of myself have I abandoned that they seemed to fulfill? That's where the work begins. And that's where freedom is born. When your mind can't stop looping around someone, it's easy to call it love. It's tempting to romanticize the obsession, to interpret the emotional noise as a divine sign that they're meant for you. But that's rarely the full truth. In most cases, what feels like deep, uncontrollable longing is actually something else, a signal, an alert that there's an unresolved emotional issue hiding beneath the surface. The mind doesn't spin its wheels around people without cause. There's a reason why certain people trigger this psychological replay. It's not random. It's not poetic. It's a symptom of conflict. An inner conflict that hasn't yet been brought to light, let alone resolved. We like to believe that our emotional experiences are always grounded in the present moment. That the person who fills our thoughts must be significant because they're stirring something intense within us right now. But the truth is, they're often just the spark that lit a fire that was already waiting to burn. That obsessive pull you feel, it didn't start with them. It started long before. Somewhere in your story, a template was formed, a way of attaching, a pattern of interpreting emotional closeness as salvation or danger. And now, when someone walks into your life and touches just the right nerve, your entire psyche lights up like it's under threat or in desperate need of validation. The human mind is built to detect patterns and preserve survival. When a person enters your life and gives you even a glimpse of what you've unconsciously longed for, whether that's connection, admiration, security, or simply being seen, your mind takes a snapshot. It records the experience and assigns it a high emotional value. And if that person then pulls away, or if things become complicated, your brain doesn't just let go. It treats the situation like an unresolved problem that must be solved. It loops the memory. It replays the conversations. It floods you with what ifs, not because it's cruel, but because it believes this unresolved emotional experience threatens your sense of order. This is where many people get lost. They think their obsession means they found the one. They think the inability to let go is evidence that the person was special beyond comprehension. But what's really happening is that their internal world is in disarray. And the mind, desperate for resolution, keeps circling around the source of the emotional disruption. It's not love that keeps you thinking about them. It's the unresolved nature of what they awakened in you. To fixate on someone is often to avoid facing a deeper question. What am I afraid to confront within myself? That person may have triggered a fear of abandonment, a deep-rooted insecurity, or a sense of not being enough. Maybe they mirrored back a part of you that you haven't yet accepted. Maybe they showed you a version of yourself you were trying to become, or reminded you of a version you've been trying to escape. In any case, they became a symbol, and your mind, trying to make sense of the symbol, got caught in the cycle. The most painful part of this experience is that it feels like you're being emotionally hijacked. Your thoughts are no longer your own. Your peace is interrupted. You begin to question your worth based on whether this person gives you attention, responds, returns. But what you don't realize is that the conflict is no longer about them. It's about you. It's about the battle between the part of you that craves healing and the part that resists facing the discomfort required to achieve it. Fixation is not always a sign of deep emotional connection. Often it's a signal that your emotional framework has been destabilized. You've been knocked off center, and instead of returning to yourself to restore balance, you're projecting your healing onto someone else. You're making them responsible, perhaps unconsciously, for solving an emotional riddle they didn't even know they were part of. To move forward, you must first acknowledge that your thoughts are not inherently trustworthy. Just because a person occupies your mind doesn't mean they belong in your future. Just because you can't stop thinking about them doesn't mean they are your destiny. The mind is easily manipulated by unresolved pain, and until you resolve that pain, your emotional compass will keep pointing toward whatever or whoever activated it. This is why emotional discipline is so crucial. You must become a steward of your own thoughts. You must examine them, not with shame, but with honesty. What does this obsession protect me from feeling? What uncomfortable truth am I avoiding? Is it easier to think about them endlessly than to admit that I've lost part of myself in the process? The irony is that the more you chase the person mentally, the further you drift from your center. You begin to forget who you were before they entered your life. You lose track of your goals, your values, your clarity. And all for the illusion that if you think hard enough, long enough, intensely enough, you'll somehow find peace. But peace doesn't come from obsession. Peace comes from understanding. And when you realize that the obsession is a sign of inner conflict, not just romantic intensity, you begin to take your power back. You stop looking at the person as the solution and start seeing them for what they are, a messenger. They showed up to awaken something in you. Maybe they triggered your fears. Maybe they offered you a mirror. Maybe they played a role they weren't even aware of. But now that the role has been played, your responsibility is yours. Your healing, your growth, your clarity. They're not dependent on whether this person stays or leaves. They depend entirely on whether you are willing to face the part of you that became so vulnerable in the first place. So the next time you find yourself drowning in thoughts of someone, remember this: the intensity of your thoughts is not proof of fate. It is a call to examine your emotional foundations. It is your mind trying to get your attention, not to pull you towards someone else, but to draw you back to yourself. And the sooner you heed that call, the sooner you return to your own strength. When someone occupies your mind constantly, It's tempting to believe they must be incredibly important to your life story. But what often goes unseen is that the person you can't stop thinking about is rarely the true focus of your obsession. More often than not, they are a placeholder, a symbol, a mirror, reflecting back to you a part of yourself that feels incomplete. You've projected onto them something you're missing internally, something you long for, something that you've either never had or feel like you've lost. They become the representation of a need. And the deeper that need runs, the more powerful your thoughts about them become. People don't fixate on others without cause. The human mind doesn't waste energy on something that carries no emotional value. And someone keeps returning to your thoughts, it's because at some level, your psyche has attached significance to them. But here's the key. Most of the time, it's not about who they truly are. It's about what they represent to you. You're not obsessed with them. You're obsessed with the version of yourself you imagine when you're with them, or the emotional state you believe they can unlock within you. Maybe they made you feel seen, and that feeling was so rare, so unfamiliar that your entire system latched onto it. Maybe they made you feel desired in a way that scratched the surface of an old wound, the kind that told you that you weren't enough. This is the danger of emotional projection. When you haven't developed certain qualities internally, like self-worth, confidence, security, or acceptance, you start looking for someone else to carry them for you. You unconsciously assign others the job of being your source of validation, comfort, or meaning, and the more deeply you believe that they are the key to these feelings, the more your mind will fight to keep them in your awareness. Not because of who they are, but because of what your psyche believes they're holding on your behalf. That's why you can become obsessed with someone you barely know, or someone who treated you poorly, or someone who was only in your life for a moment. Your conscious mind might be confused by the intensity, but your subconscious mind is crystal clear. This person symbolizes something that feels essential to your emotional survival. And until you retrieve that power, until you claim those missing parts of yourself, they will continue to haunt your inner world. There is a difference between love and projection. Love sees clearly. Love accepts the other person as they are without illusion. But projection is built on fantasy. It fills in the blanks with your unmet needs. It elevates the person not for who they are, but for what they represent. They become an icon of possibility, not a human being. And when you assign someone else the role of fulfilling what you haven't yet given yourself, you set the stage for dependency, disappointment, and emotional chaos. Think about it. Why do we obsess over people who don't reciprocate? Why do we hold on to someone who walked away, or who sent mixed signals, or who gave us attention only to withdraw it later? It's because inconsistency activates scarcity. And when something becomes scarce, we assign it more value. You start believing that this person holds something rare. But the rarity is not them. The rarity is the emotional experience you attach to them. That's what you're chasing. That's what you're really after. The person is just the carrier of that experience. But here's the truth that sets you free. You can create that experience yourself. You can cultivate the same emotional state that you believe they're responsible for giving you. You don't need to chase someone to feel whole. You need to reconnect with the parts of yourself that you've neglected. Because when you do that, the obsession dissolves. Not because the person changes, but because the power you projected onto them returns to where it always belonged. With you. This doesn't mean you won't feel the pull anymore. It doesn't mean you won't have moments where your mind drifts back to them. But when you see the projection for what it is, you stop being ruled by it. You stop letting your thoughts be hijacked by the fantasy, and in that awareness, you begin to heal. The way out of this pattern isn't through more contact with the person, more conversations, more closure. The way out is through self-reclamation. You have to become the source of what you were trying to get from them. If they made you feel important, you must start treating your life like it matters. If they made you feel beautiful, you must start seeing yourself with the same kindness and awe. If they made you feel wanted, you must start wanting your own growth, your own truth, your own presence. This is not an easy process. It requires brutal honesty. It requires you to face the parts of yourself that have been hungry for too long. And it demands that you stop looking outward for rescue, because no one can save you from your own emotional projection. Only you can. But the reward is freedom. When you stop projecting what you lack, you become whole. And from that place of wholeness, you attract differently. You love differently. You think differently. You're no longer magnetized by the people who reflect your wounds. Instead, you're drawn to those who mirror your strength, your clarity, your integrity. And that changes everything. So if someone lives in your mind rent-free, ask yourself this: what do they represent to me? What am I hoping they'll fulfill that I haven't yet claimed within myself? And how can I begin giving myself that gift today? Not tomorrow, not when they return, not if they text, but now. Because until you do, you will continue to mistake projection for connection, fantasy for fate. And you deserve better than that. You deserve truth. You deserve presence. You deserve the peace that comes when you finally return your power to yourself. The person you can't stop thinking about isn't just occupying your mind. They're influencing your identity. Thought after thought, day after day, they become more than just a memory or a person. You begin shaping your choices, your emotions, and even your self-worth around their existence. This is where the damage quietly begins. When someone takes up that much mental space, you start adapting your inner world to accommodate them. Often without realizing you're doing it. You check your phone constantly, not because you're expecting something logical, but because a part of you has become emotionally dependent on a response. You alter your behavior, your goals, your energy, just to stay connected, if only in your imagination, to someone who may not even be actively involved in your life anymore. This isn't love. This is surrendering your sense of self to a narrative that no longer serves you. One of the greatest dangers of persistent fixation is the slow erosion of your personal agency. When someone dominates your thoughts, they also begin to define your emotional state. You become reactive instead of intentional. If they're warm, you feel high. If they're distant, you plummet. Your sense of peace, confidence, even purpose begins to hinge on their proximity and attention. And that's how you lose yourself. Not in one dramatic moment, but gradually through thousands of tiny emotional decisions, where you choose them over your own center, over your own clarity, over your own healing. The most insidious part of this dynamic is that it often disguises itself as hope. You tell yourself the reason you can't stop thinking about them is because something profound is at play. You convince yourself that the obsession is proof of a rare connection or destiny or a love story not yet finished. But that hope becomes a trap. You start living in a future that doesn't exist. You imagine conversations, reunions, apologies. You stay stuck, not because you're incapable of moving on, but because you're addicted to the version of reality where they eventually validate the depth of your feelings. That version plays like a movie in your mind. It gives you emotional highs, but it robs you of the present. It steals the time and energy you could be investing in yourself, in growth, in something real. What you have to understand is this: the more you think about someone who isn't actively part of your life, the more power to give them over your current reality. They don't have to say a word, and yet they're controlling your emotional climate. They don't have to be physically present, and yet they dictate the pace of your healing. That's not connection. That's emotional captivity. And the only one who can unlock that prison is you. This is not a call to become numb. It's not a push to suppress your feelings. It's a challenge to reorient your focus. When you catch yourself thinking about them for the 100th time in a day, ask, what am I actually feeling right now? Am I lonely? Insecure? Disappointed? Am I trying to escape something in my current life by diving into the fantasy of what could have been? Because behind the obsession is usually a pain you haven't yet faced, a fear of being alone, a belief that you're not enough on your own, a wound that says being chosen is the only thing that gives you value. That's where the real work begins. And that's what those recurring thoughts are trying to cover up. There's a deeper layer to this, and it's one most people don't like to talk about: identity loss. When you wrap your self-worth around another person, your identity becomes entangled with theirs. You become a version of yourself that only exists in relation to them. Without them, you feel aimless. You forget what it feels like to be full, independent, grounded. That loss of self isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes in quiet compromises. You stop doing things you used to love. You lose enthusiasm for your own plans. You begin defining success or happiness in terms of whether they return, whether they approve, whether they see you again. Slowly, your life becomes a waiting room, not a journey. Reclaiming your identity means remembering who you were before they entered the picture, and then going deeper. It means building a version of yourself that isn't shaped by their presence or absence. And that kind of self-restoration requires courage, because it means letting go of the illusion that they complete you. It means facing the terrifying idea that you can be whole even without them, that your life doesn't begin when they come back, but when you return to yourself. It takes discipline to break free. Emotional discipline, the ability to sit with the discomfort instead of escaping into the fantasy. The willingness to choose yourself again and again, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because the truth is, you don't miss them as much as you miss who you were when you felt close to them. You don't crave their presence as much as you crave the emotional safety or excitement they once triggered in you. And those feelings, they can be rebuilt from within. Not overnight, but through deliberate, honest work. Through choosing habits that serve your growth. Through conversations that help you see clearly. Through actions that reinforce your worth, regardless of who is or isn't by your side. The mind is powerful, and if left unchecked, it will drag you into patterns that feel familiar but are destructive. That's why you need to interrupt the cycle, not by force, but by redirection. Every time your thoughts pull you into a fantasy about them, redirect that energy toward a real goal. Build something, create something, learn something, heal something. Because obsession thrives on idle energy, but progress kills it. Growth is the antidote to fixation. So if someone is taking up all the space in your head and they're not taking any steps to be in your life, ask yourself why you're allowing them to live there. Ask yourself what part of your identity has been handed over to a memory, and then begin the work of calling it back, piece by piece, day by day, not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because your life deserves your full presence. Because your story cannot unfold if your attention is stuck in someone else's chapter. When you can't stop thinking about someone, you're not just emotionally tethered, you're energetically drained. The obsessive thoughts aren't harmless daydreams. They are consuming your focus, your productivity, and your capacity for peace. Every moment spent looping around what could have been, what should have been, or what might still be is a moment stolen from the present. This kind of mental occupation becomes a form of self-abandonment. While your attention is trapped in someone else's orbit, your own life quietly begins to fall apart at the edges. Your goals lose clarity, your discipline fades. You stop showing up fully for yourself because emotionally you've outsourced your power to another person. There's a cost to fixation, and that cost is your potential. People rarely recognize how much they're sacrificing by staying mentally loyal to someone who is no longer actively contributing to their life. It might feel like you're just holding space, like you're waiting with dignity, like your persistence is noble. But in reality, what you're doing is delaying your evolution. You're postponing your next chapter. Out of fear, out of fantasy, out of false hope, you're clinging to the image of what that person represents to you, whether it's closure, comfort, redemption, or love. And in doing so, you're neglecting the very life you have the power to build. When the mind becomes obsessed, the imagination begins to work against you. It constructs illusions. It edits memories to highlight the good and blur out the bad. It creates scenarios where everything works out, where they realize your worth, where they finally become who you needed them to be. This imagined version of them becomes more intoxicating than reality ever was. And you start living not in your life, but in a dream. You replay old conversations, dissect every word, rehearse future interactions, all while the real world waits for you to come back to it. But the world doesn't stop just because your mind is stuck. Time moves, opportunities pass. Relationships with others begin to suffer because your emotional bandwidth is spent. You become less present, less engaged, less alive. You may appear functional, but internally you're distracted, disconnected, depleted. And the longer this cycle goes on, the harder it is to remember who you were before the obsession began. Your sense of self starts to erode, not through any one dramatic collapse, but through a slow, daily leak of energy and intention. To break free from this mental prison, you must first confront the truth. This person no longer belongs in the center of your thoughts, not because they were insignificant, not because the connection didn't matter, but because the cost of their presence in your mind has become too high. You owe yourself more than a life spent fantasizing about someone who is not showing up for you. You owe yourself reality, truth, movement. And that starts by reclaiming your energy. Reclaiming your energy is not about pretending they never mattered. It's about refusing to let your life revolve around their absence. It's about waking up to the fact that your thoughts are a resource and you've been investing them in someone who isn't giving you a return. If you spent your money the way you spend your thoughts on someone unavailable, inconsistent, or indifferent, you'd call it financial ruin. But when it comes to emotional energy, we let ourselves go bankrupt, thinking it's devotion. There's nothing romantic about sacrificing your peace for the sake of someone else's potential. There's nothing noble about anchoring your emotions to someone who has already let go. True strength is not in holding on. It's in letting go with purpose, in choosing to redirect your energy even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because that's when the shift happens. That's when healing begins. Not when they come back, not when they explain themselves, but when you decide that your life is too valuable to be lived half present, half dreaming. The greatest transformation starts with a single, brutal question. How much of myself have I lost trying to keep this person alive in my mind? Am I willing to start retrieving what I gave away? You start by noticing where your energy leaks. Every time you check their social media, every time you reread old messages, every time you imagine a different ending, you're leaking energy. It feels small in the moment, but those moments add up. They become hours, days, weeks, and before you know it, you've invested months of your emotional life into a version of a relationship that only exists in your head. Recovery means closing the leaks. It means reclaiming your mornings, your attention, your passions. It means putting your phone down when the urge to check on them arises and choosing instead to invest in your future. It means building routines that anchor you to the present. It means remembering that your energy is sacred and it should be spent on people and purposes that give life back to you. Eventually, the thoughts quiet down, but not because time heals. Time only heals if it's used well. Obsession dies not through waiting, but through action. Through conscious, repeated decisions to place your energy where it can grow, into your work, your friendships, your health, your craft, into you. This is your life right now. Not the one you had with them, not the one you're hoping to have in some distant future. This one, today, with all its mess and potential. And you have a choice. Stay lost in the loop of thoughts, or step out and reclaim the energy you've forgotten is yours. You are not just the person who got hurt or left or overlooked. You are also the person who survived, the one who can rebuild, the one who can redirect, the one who can finally, fully come home to themselves.